there you are. 10 o'clock hour has arrived, and 10:01 to be precise. And the Livestock Subcommittee and Foreign Agriculture will now come to order. I think we've got a good subcommittee hearing this morning. We have, I think, some very talented individuals who have hands-on experience in production agriculture on dealing with sustainability, economic sustainability, while improving environmental conditions as it relates to their operations and making it pay off. So as we do with typical subcommittee hearings, we will, after opening remarks, members will receive testimony from our witnesses today, and then we will then open it up for questions in consultation with the ranking member. Rule 11, I want to make members of the subcommittee aware that other members of the full committee may join us today, and we welcome their participation. And so we look forward to that occurring. And the opportunity to get some things done as we look at the challenges facing American agriculture and issues involving American agriculture under these challenging times that we're living in, I think is important for this subcommittee to focus on as we prepare not only for this year's legislative agenda, but also as we set the table for next year's Farm Bill. And I, in my mind, look at these efforts as all tied in one fashion or another. And I want to thank the members of the subcommittee and members of the full committee that are participating because it's a good opportunity for us to try to maintain the bipartisanship that has always been a hallmark of the House Agriculture Committee that I think we're all proud of. Having said that, let me start by saying good morning. I want to thank our witnesses and Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee today for our opportunity to discuss the impacts of climate change, sustainability in the livestock sector. I think many of us have personal relationships with constituents that are among the most innovative in the livestock community in America. I know I certainly do, and I'm very proud of those folks that are involved and engaged. I don't think we can waver from the impacts that climate change is having with regards to not only the air and the water and the other important resource issues that we consume, but also the impacts worldwide. And as a third-generation farmer, a person that's been engaged and seen a lot of changes over the years, I like to say that I think farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women are among the most concerned of stewards of the environment because the whole renewability and the ability to maintain the renewability of that resource, the air and the water and the land, is essential, critical to their ability to maintain their farming operations. The Biden administration has rejoined the Paris Agreement. I think this is an opportunity for us to look on how we work together, not only in this country, but around the world. That means reducing our carbon footprint as it relates to emissions in ways that make sense, working with industry. And that's part of the reason for this subcommittee hearing, to figure out how we deal with the impacts and ensure that we have measurable outcomes. I can tell you that in California, we've been doing that for a number of years. I'm glad that we have some witnesses from California that can share their experiences with us today. I think we all feel very strongly about agriculture and its important role in putting food on America's dinner table every night. It is, as I think many of you have heard me say time and time again, a national security issue. And I think agriculture, certainly the folks that I work with at home, understand that the issue of climate change is important. water and the snow melt, snowpack that we get in California's mountains are critical to our sustainability of having adequate water supply. And yet we see increasing changes of our snowpack and our water availability. And of course, result of that in part is the horrific fires that we've had to address in California. But like all farmers, I'm an optimist. I think you have to be an optimist if you're a farmer, a rancher, or a dairyman or woman. And I think the flip side of the value of these challenges we face is that agriculture can and is making a meaningful contribution toward reducing and offsetting emissions. Today, we will hear from producers and others to how they have advanced in their own operations sustainability initiatives so that we can better understand the challenges on how farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women are coming together to deal what they can do, certainly when incentives are provided to impact climate change, and what the barriers are, incentives that we need to factor in to help them in achieving these goals. In addition, I think we need to account for the impact that in terms of cropping patterns, in terms of availability of water resources in different regions of our country and throughout the world, frankly, that climate change is going to have. There's a lot of areas where the sustainability of agriculture around the world is going to be very difficult in semi-arid regions because of a lack of water. And so we all have, I think, a responsibility here. I mean, deteriorating conditions, as an example, in grazing lands impacts our livestock producers. I've got family that farms on the West Coast Range Mountains of California. And when they look at 10-year averages and the amount of precipitation they get to grow those grasses to feed their cattle, it becomes a very difficult challenge in terms of the amount of years that they can count on enough feed to make that operation work. So that only puts a further strain on our food production. I think the panel that we have here is an impressive caliber of knowledge on what is being done to build sustainability in our livestock system. I know the two individuals from California certainly have a lot of experience there. Look forward to a productive discussion with members of the subcommittee so that we can work together in a collaborative fashion, in a bipartisan fashion, with our livestock producers to scale up adoption of climate smart practices. So I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Ranking Member Dusty Johnson from South Dakota, for any remarks that he would like to make at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and your team also for how collaborative you are in the lead up to these hearings. I want to echo what you said about this being an impressive panel, and I'm looking forward to hearing from these knowledgeable and solutions-focused experts. But let's be clear, there are threats because there are less knowledgeable and less solutions-focused people who are sharing their views in other venues. I was disappointed earlier this week to see the New York Times had an opinion piece titled, and I'm not making this up, "Meet the People Getting Paid to Kill Our Planet." And the opinion piece made sweeping, inaccurate statements about American agriculture. The piece seemed oblivious to the kind of progress that we're making as a country. The piece was terrible, and it was made worse by the fact that some members of Congress, including Senator Cory Booker, cooperated with the project. So let's be clear, because the facts are not in dispute. In recent decades, the U.S. beef industry has reduced net emissions by more than 40%. And so net emissions from U.S. beef production are 10 times lower than net emissions in other parts of the world. Additionally, U.S. ranchers are producing the same amount of beef today as they did in 1977, with 33% fewer animals and, of course, less land being used as well. And farm productivity was 287% greater in 2017 than it was in 1948. I mean, that's just incredible, 287% greater. And so, Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right. The American farmer, the American rancher, they are producing more with less. They have made the United States the most efficient producer of food and fiber in the world. And Mr. Chairman, that environmental progress will continue because of the solutions being worked on by the witnesses on our panel today, as well as progress being made by others. And those solutions are coming in many forms. I would call out one, precision ranching technologies being developed by South Dakota State University and the West River Research and Extension Center. And this is a neat project. I mean, they are deploying a series of precision measuring technologies in Phillips, South Dakota. So what do? They're using GPS, they're using precision scales to track individual cattle location and weight on a daily basis. And these tools also allow producers to manage grazing rotations with a smartphone. And so collectively, these tools are giving us unprecedented insight into the grazing practices of these cattle, what they're eating, what that means for weight gain, and what that means for food quality and sustainability. This is an incredibly fun project, and it's an important one as well. And so I would just close by saying this, Mr. Chairman, a better, more sustainable future will not come from the harsh, scolding voices of the naysayers. It's going to come from the leadership and innovation of people like the researchers at SDSU and our witnesses today. I'm looking forward to the discussion. And with that, I yield back.
I want to thank my friend and colleague from South Dakota for making those points. I could not agree with you more. The collaborative and the constructive efforts on behalf of American agriculture on a region by region basis, I think, has been significant. Yes, we can do more, and that's part of the purpose of this subcommittee hearing. The fact is that American agriculture does more with less, as the numbers you've stated, I think, substantiate. And yes, we have challenges out there, but the fact is that nobody, I think, in so many different ways on a region by region basis is trying to their very best to implement best on-site farm management practices that will ultimately produce results. But there is more, obviously, that we can and should do. As is the common courtesy of this subcommittee and other subcommittees, we always recognize when we hold a subcommittee hearing, the chair and the ranking member of the full committee, if in fact they are participating and they wish to make a comment. Maintaining that tradition, my friend from Pennsylvania, Mr. G.T. Thompson, is here this morning participating with us, and I would yield him time to an opportunity to make comments that he may choose to make. Representative Thompson.
Well, good morning, Chairman. Thank you so much. Ranking Member Johnson, thank you both for this hearing. I certainly want to align myself with the comments that have been made here. You know, American agriculture from the very beginnings has always been science, technology, and innovation, but that means that we're not static. We are dynamic and with incredible opportunities ahead. Though it's always been science, technology, innovation, the rate of innovation today is happening exponentially. It's very exciting for America and for and certainly for our work together on the Agriculture Committee. I'd also like to thank each of our witnesses for their participation today. As you've heard previously, U.S. farm productivity and management practices have improved dramatically over the past 70 years, specifically productivity increasing 287%, while the inputs and land use have remained well, if not unchanged, quite frankly, less land, sadly, where we see acreage go out of agriculture production. In short, we're producing much more food and fiber while using maybe the same amount, but I would argue less resources than we did generations ago. I believe this is something that isn't talked about enough. U.S. producers are the shining star when it comes to resiliency, sustainability, and summarize that, if you would prefer, with the word climate. Agriculture is the solution. It's not the problem. It's research, innovation, and technology. Now, just as they've been for the past 70 years, innovation and research has to remain at the forefront of these efforts moving forward, certainly at the forefront of our efforts as a committee, just as they have been for the past 70 years by those who farmers, ranchers, foresters, innovation and research. It's just so incredible what it's so important to be our as a just an effective tool. From biotechnology to promising livestock feed ingredients to precision agriculture and new cropping systems. Support for development and adoption of innovation products and practices will be critical to ensuring farmers have the tools necessary to continue sustainability, enhancing productivity. Now, policies from Washington should acknowledge the agriculture sector's success and contributions that we make to sustainability and climate, environment, the economy, and build upon it by focusing on their efforts to voluntarily do more, ultimately by incentivizing pro-growth solutions. Well, that's why I introduced the Sustains Act, which provides an opportunity for the private sector to partner with USDA to further engage farmers and ranchers in supporting voluntary conservation initiatives. Bipartisan solutions should revolve around a commitment to these proven programs, reducing bureaucratic red tape and ultimately regulations. Now, I fear that the opposite approach, burdensome top-down regulations and costly, complicated policies, will harm rural economies while displacing U.S. production with that of less efficient foreign producers. Now, I know that's something that we all want to avoid. And I certainly look forward to hearing from today's witnesses and learning more about their voluntary initiatives and thoughtful recommendations. And with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the opportunity and to be a part of this subcommittee hearing, and I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for his comments, and I would like to request that members of the subcommittee submit their opening statements for the record so witnesses may begin their testimony and so that we can ensure there's ample time for questions. As we have, and some of the witnesses today before us have testified before, and I'm trying to see if the witnesses have it available to them because it would be more helpful if they do. I don't seem to have it on my screen, but this new world that we live in and virtual hearings sometimes makes it complicated to participate. But there's 5 minutes time that is allotted for everyone's testimony. And of course, members are allotted the same amount of time for their comments or questions that they wish to make when it comes their turn. So I'm pleased to welcome our distinguished panel of witnesses here today, as we've noted. They bring a wide range of experience and expertise around the country on the issues of climate impacts and American agriculture. So we thank you all for joining us. Our first witness today is Dr. Kim Stackhouse Lawson. She has her PhD as the director of NextAg and professor in Department of Animal Sciences at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is one of America's premier universities. And we're very pleased that Dr. Lawson, Stackhouse Lawson, excuse me, that you're available today. I hope you have the screen available so that you can see and that you can begin with your comments for 5 minutes, and I'll try to be appropriate at the time that your is concluded. But please begin your presentation for members of the subcommittee.
Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I am Dr. Kim Stackhouse Lawson, Director of AgNext and a Professor of Animal Science at Colorado State University. AgNext is a first-of-its-kind research collaborative focused on sustainable solutions for animal agriculture. Sustainability is defined using a three-pillar approach: social, economic, and environment. Each pillar is dependent on the other, and no one pillar is more important. Due to the complexity and importance of animal agriculture systems, we must consider interactions and potential unintended consequences of solutions towards enhanced sustainability. By 2050, our planet's population will increase by 2.2 billion, requiring food production to increase by 70%. Estimates suggest that animal agriculture production will need to increase 100% to ensure adequate nutrition to this rapidly growing population. Climate change is going to have a major impact on our food supply chain. These changes alone are going to challenge and require improvements in the adaptive capacity and resiliency of our farmers and ranchers and rural communities. There is no question that this will be the greatest challenge of our lifetime. Providing this nutrition and doing so within the bounds of our planetary resources in an equitable way should be our focus. The critical nature and timeliness of ensuring food security and doubling food production while also meeting sustainability goals is no small task. In sustainability, silver bullets do not exist. We must take a more inclusive and systematic approach to ensure we do not solve one problem and create other intended impacts. It is critical that we develop solutions that are place-based, practical for farmers and ranchers to adopt, and economically viable. Further complicating sustainability is the pace at which it is growing in importance. Many leading companies and industries have announced aggressive sustainability goals, including net zero targets by 2040 and 2050 that will have real and lasting impacts on the food system as we know it today. Many countries and governments, including the US, have made similar commitments. While I appreciate the intention and momentum behind setting these aggressive targets, the roadmaps to achieve these goals are elusive. More information is needed to inform these strategies, namely the development of appropriate baselines and real-world solutions that result in tangible science-based outcomes. Filling this knowledge gap will allow the livestock industry, academia, and policymakers to understand how food production interacts with and impacts climate change. The livestock industry and academic community continue to actively explore how to effectively measure, validate, and continually improve livestock sustainability, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions in a holistic and comprehensive way. Greenhouse gases from livestock are difficult to measure. And until the last decade, scientists didn't have an effective methods to quantify greenhouse gas emissions from livestock in their natural environments. Today, emission estimates are based on models that use limited absolute emission data. Absolute emission data from livestock is needed to fully understand mitigation potential. Without a robust baseline, farmers and ranchers and others along the supply chain are faced with the challenge to reduce emissions, but lack an understanding of where to begin, which makes it nearly impossible to determine if mitigation strategies are effective. An additional component of this research must focus on scalable solutions that are also profitable for producers to promote economic growth, while ensuring that the food system can produce the amount of nutrient-dense food that will be required to meet the nutritional needs of a growing population over the coming decades. To develop truly sustainable solutions, all stakeholders need to be engaged and invested in the process, and this should include government entities and policymakers. Currently, there is limited access to federal funding, grants, and private investments to research greenhouse gas emissions in livestock systems. Private investing in the space of sustainability is rapidly increasing and evolving faster than ever before. And there's an opportunity to leverage these funds and this momentum as we work together to meet this challenge. While sustainability has become a major focus recently, the livestock industry has been dedicated to continuous improvement for several decades. The majority of livestock production in the US happens on family-owned and operated farms and ranches. US livestock operations are a critical element to the affordable, high-quality protein available to domestic and international consumers. Pressure is being placed on farmers and ranchers to mitigate impact without the appropriate tools that they need to be successful. As we move toward researching sustainable solutions for the livestock industry, it is critical that these strategies generated are applicable to the appropriate region in which the operation is located and improve the overall sustainability of the food system. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before this panel, and I would be glad to address your questions, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson, for your comments and your points. I think they are well taken. The ability to provide measurements that are understandable and solutions that can achieve those goals are critical toward our ability to manage this. And your point about sufficient funding to do a lot of the research that is necessary is something that we should take into account as it relates to the next farm bill and some of the other efforts that are ongoing with legislation. I think your perspective really points out something I like to talk about regularly that I think is really makes the United States in some ways so different than other parts of the world. And that's our land grant universities, our agricultural schools like yours that have played an important role historically in terms of research that has allowed American agriculture over 100 years to really achieve the levels of quality and production and best management practices that without that academic involvement, I don't think would have been possible. So keep up the good work. And our next witness today is a person and her family, Rosie Burrows, with the Burrows Family Farms in Denair, California. Their marketing flagship for organic and regenerative grass-based pasture-raised added value products produced by the family enterprises include almonds, beef, chicken, dairies, eggs, sheep, olive oil, walnuts, meat, birds, and turkeys. Their farming and ranching efforts are like California, diverse, and therefore we're very proud of their efforts. And Ms. Burrows, please, you have 5 minutes to present to the committee. We're looking forward to hearing your comments.
Good morning, Subcommittee Chairman Costa, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, and members of the full committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you about my family's farms and our experiences farming with regenerative practices. My husband Ward and I farm with our children and their families in the rolling foothills of the San Joaquin Valley in California in northern Merced County and in Bonanza, Oregon. We are carrying on the Burrows family farming legacy, which spans over a century. And over the last 20 years, we have formed partnerships with our children. Thank you for mentioning all of our products under the Burrows Family Farms marketing flagship. Our nation's greatest resource is the rancher and the farmer families who are the stewards of our grasslands and farmlands and are devoted to producing our country's food and fiber. Our future survival depends on how we handle climate change and the extreme weather patterns of drought and devastating storms, which are symptomatic of the warming of our planet. It is extremely important that U.S. agriculture responds to these problems by adopting regenerative agriculture practices. As we started our farming ranching journey as conventional farmers, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we were part of the problem. Around 40 years ago, we discovered the holistic approach to ranching and farming. And 20 years ago, our path to organic ranching and farming using regenerative practices. Let me take a moment to explain regenerative agriculture. It is a system of farming principles and practices that seek to regenerate and enhance the entire ecosystem of our farms, our ranches, by concentrating on building soil health, which increases soil biodiversity and organic matter, leading to more resilient soils that can better withstand climate change impacts like flooding and drought. Regenerative practices help us fight the climate crisis by pulling carbon from the atmosphere and sequestering it in the ground. Healthy soils leads to strong yields and nutrient-dense rich crops. To do this on our farms, we're using these practices to build soil health, no-till or minimum till, planting cover crops, keeping the soil covered with the diversity of plants for as long as possible, and we have integrated animal grazing on our rangelands, irrigated pastures, and orchards when possible. We use compost and manure for our fertility. Research conducted by Agdiasis and Cal State East Bay in a comparative study, including our regenerative almond orchard, showed that regenerative orchards can have a 30% higher soil organic matter, significantly greater carbon sequestration and soil health, 6 times higher water infiltration rates, 6 times higher insect biomass, and measurably greater soil microbial activity and similar yields. This is proof that regenerative ag practices will work to ensuring our farmers and ranchers continue their work by being sustainable and viable while protecting our environment. We are very proud to be part of the regenerative agriculture movement, which has been gaining momentum, but we need more support to continue forward in research and education. I am here today to implore this committee to support funding in the new Farm Bill for regenerative agriculture practices. In closing, I have listed more information with links in my written testimony. We are hosting a Farm Field Day on February 17th, and I'd really like you to take special attention to the 2 links for the Center for Regenerative Agriculture and Resilient Systems at CSU Chico and the Ecdysis Foundation, both excellent resources on current research and education. Thank you for your opportunity to testify and share my experiences about our family's farms. And I hope and pray that you will take the information in this hearing to support the sustainability of livestock systems.
Ms. Burrows, we thank you very much for your firsthand experience and trying to ensure that your farming operations are as sustainable as they possibly can be, and the experiences you've had to deal with, you and your family, in making those changes and adjustments. And we look forward to having an opportunity to question you on your February 17th Farm Day. Please get my office the information. I don't know that it's possible that I could be there, but if it is, I would certainly like to see it firsthand. Our next witness is an individual who I've known for a number of years, who farms in my area. His family has been active in dairy in California for generations. He operates Madeira's Holsteins in California. He's also a member of the executive committee of the National Milk Producers Federation. And he is now working on, I think, Melvin, the 3rd or 4th generation in your family to maintain that involvement. But you don't farm the way your father did, nor your grandfather, nor do I. And we look forward to your comments. Please begin.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, Chairman Costa, ranking members, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. And I thank you for the opportunity to testify today and share the dairy industry's perspective on sustainability. My name is Melvin Medeiros. I've been dairying since 1981 on a farm started by my parents. Today, my wife, Kelly, and I own and operate Madeira's Holsteins, along with Madeira's Dairy, a 1,600 cow dairy operation in California, along with our 2 sons. I am honored to serve as chairman of the Western Area Council for Dairy Farmers of America, the leading dairy co-op and milk marketing cooperative in the U.S. I am testifying before you today on behalf of the National Milk Producers Federation, of which DFA is a member cooperative, and I serve on the executive committee. U.S. dairy farmers are environmental stewards. We tend with great care to our land and water and ensure future generations can carry on an important work of feeding the U.S. and the world. We value proactive sustainability and have adopted agricultural practices and technologies that have evolved over time. As a testament to the dairy's endeavors, by 2007, producing a gallon of milk used 90% of the land, 65% less water, with 63% smaller carbon footprint than in 1944. More recently, research shows that producing a gallon of milk in 2017 requires 30% less water, 21% less land, 19% smaller carbon footprint, and 20% less manure than by 2007. As a farmer-owned cooperative, DFA is always working to identify new, innovative ways to conserve resources and is committed to working to a 30% reduction in emissions across the cooperative by 2030. From a 2018 baseline. More broadly, in 2009, U.S. dairy industry launched the National Dairy Farm Program to demonstrate that the U.S. dairy farmers are committed to producing the best milk with integrity. The farm program's environmental stewardship pillar provides a comprehensive climate, greenhouse emissions, and energy use on dairy farms with resources for farmers to measure and improve their footprint. Today, organizations representing 99% of the U.S. milk volume participate in the farm program. overall, with almost 80% of the milk volume participating in the environmental stewardship portion. Farmers are always striving to produce more with less, focused on continuous improvements in that area as part of the commitment to provide the world responsibly produced dairy foods. In 2020, the U.S. dairy sector set aggressive new environmental sustainability goals to become greenhouse neutral or better, improve water quality, optimize water usage by 2050. My cooperative is determined to do its part in the dairy industry and achieve these goals. To do this, the dairy industry will need to identify technological and other advancements to accelerate improvements. National Milk and the industry's partners have mobilized through Net Zero initiative to do just that. However, sustained low milk prices, high input costs have created many challenges for recent dairy producers. Dairy farmers are eager for policy improvements that will unlock additional revenue streams and make advanced environmental protection a source of economical strength in the dairy farms. To help U.S. dairy farmers enhance their ongoing sustainability leadership, the dairy industry needs your support. National Milk recommends two broad areas to improving policy. First, USDA conservation programs must be instrumental in achieving sustainable goals, but we urge better tailoring of programs towards manure and feed management. Enteric emissions account for roughly 1/3 of dairy farm greenhouse gases. For the footprint are a key area of opportunity for progress, and we support increasing program funding to keep and achieve these goals and are grateful to the members of both parties that have put forth legislation to bolster conservation programs. Second, National Milk supports policies that spur and adopt innovative technology practices. Dairy farmers see great value in adopting anaerobic digesters and to reduce emissions, but lacks sustainable markets for this energy produced on farm and has limited their economical viability. Similar, new animal feed additives significantly reduce enteric emissions, but current U.S. policy hinders timely approval and puts U.S. farmers at a competitive disadvantage. To solve these problems, we support creating an incentive tax credit to cover upfront cost of digesters, and we urge expediting FDA's approval of safe, effective animal feed ingredients. Before I close, I want to emphasize how critical sustainability is to remaining a competitive global supplier. More than 16% of U.S. milk production is exported. The U.S. dairy sector is well positioned to meet environmental demands of consumers worldwide. Our farmers have the lowest greenhouse gas footprint per gallon of milk compared to other suppliers around the world. But our competitors are continuously making investments, working on positioning their way of farming as more sustainable. This type of support I have outlined today is needed to help us counter that. In conclusion, I want to note that the agriculture industry has been focused on sustainability for many generations. While we might have talked different, our goals have always been leave the resources to our farms better for our children. Your participation can help fill these policy gaps and make even further strides. So thank you for the opportunity to represent the dairy industry, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Melvin, and your family and your comments, and we look forward to the opportunity to ask you some questions and get some better insight on challenges you're facing. Our next witness is the Brackett family. They have Brackett ranches in Nevada and Idaho border, lands where they graze cattle and are private lands owned by the family, and they also deal with federal allotments owned by the federal government. And they manage in a partnership with federal agencies. They've had a long history and been involved with the National Cattlemen's Beef Board and the Idaho Cattle Association, and have a long track record of experience in dealing with the challenges that the cattle industry faces. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Kim Brackett for your comments and testimony, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you, Chairman Costa and Ranking Member Johnson and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. My name is Kim Brackett, and together with my husband Ira and our 4 children, we manage Brackett Ranches, which is a cow-calf operation on the Idaho and Nevada border. The lands where we graze our cattle are both private lands, which are owned by my family, and federal allotments owned by the federal government and managed in partnership with federal agencies. As chairman of the Beef Industry's 5-year strategic plan task force, I can tell you that we have a key industry objective to intensify efforts in reaching, improving, and communicating U.S. beef industry sustainability. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk with you about that work. Collectively, cattle producers in the United States manage livestock on approximately 815 million acres. That's nearly 1/3 of our nation's continental landmass. In addition to providing grass for our cattle, pastures and rangeland provide important ecosystem services, sequestering carbon in the soil, naturally filtering water, and improving wildlife and habitat. The beef cattle industry has a great sustainability story. This is proven by generations of successful production. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, direct emissions from beef cattle only represent 2% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Not only are beef cattle not significant contributors to the full emissions profile, the work cattle and cattle producers do helps to avoid other kinds of emissions, like those from catastrophic wildfire, and it makes lands more drought resilient. Cattle ranchers are the original protectors of biodiversity. My family and our ranch are no exception. One of the examples of this is that for us to get drinking water to our cattle in our sagebrush country, we have an underground pipeline system that starts at the head of the Jarbidge Mountains and runs 70 miles down that mountain across the Bruno Desert. Our pipeline system is a prime example of the value of a holistic, systems-based approach to managing our ranch. That pipeline provides water for our cattle, but it also brings drinking water to the wildlife and birds on our rangelands. By maintaining and expanding this pipeline system over the years, we have increased wildlife and bird habitat, thus increasing biodiversity. Another example of a sustainable practice on our ranch is targeted grazing. When cattle are allowed to graze at the right time of year, it will reduce seed production and reduce long-term spread of invasive annual grasses that can be fuel for massive wildfires. Preserving these large, unbroken landscapes is critical for environmental health. When ranchers are regulated out of business, these vast lands are often divided and sold in small acre parcels, greatly impeding wildlife migratory habitats. Our industry came together last year to develop long-term sustainability goals. I'd like to share those with you. Our industry has committed to 1, demonstrate the climate neutrality of U.S. cattle production by 2040. 2, create and enhance opportunities that result in a quantifiable increase in producer profitability and economic sustainability. 3, enhance trust in cattle producers as responsible stewards of their animals and resources by expanding educational opportunities in animal care and handling programs to further improve animal well-being. And 4, to continuously improve our industry's workforce safety and well-being. Our goals embrace the idea that sustainability is a 3-legged stool. Cattle operations and our industry must be environmentally sensitive, economically viable, and socially responsible in order to stay in business. Every day, our industry loses vital grasslands to development or other non-agricultural uses. It is of the utmost importance that we preserve our legacy carbon sinks across this country, especially our grazing lands. By creating private market value for ecosystem services like wildlife habitat, water filtration, and carbon sequestration, we can ensure that grassland managers are being compensated for all the services they provide, food production and conservation. Congress also has an important role to play here by ensuring that ranches can effectively be passed to the next generation and by working to protect cattle producers from unaffordable regulatory burden. Combating regulatory burden is necessary to maximize our industry's potential to reduce emissions. Our family remains committed to environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brackett, for your comments. And I think your illustration of how you have been able to manage your own family's livestock operation in a responsible way, and certainly your recommendations are well taken. I failed to note for members of the subcommittee and for our witnesses that we are being televised this morning today on C-SPAN. So you can certainly let your constituents back home, and those family members can see this being televised live throughout the country. Our next witness we have is an individual who in part closes, I think, the loop in our efforts to talk about the entirety of how we produce food, as I said, throughout the country on a regional basis that ultimately gets to America's dinner table. And clearly, as I said, food is a national security issue. And I get frustrated on occasion that sometimes too many Americans think that their food comes from their grocery store or their favorite restaurant. Not that that's bad. We obviously get our food from multiple sources, but it's important that we know ultimately the challenge of producing that food to our family's dinner table or to our favorite restaurant, which I think is a good lead on for our next witness, Mr. Ernie Meyer. He chairs the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs and Director of Quality Systems for U.S. Supply Chain, part of McDonald's USA Chicago operations, and a person that I think can provide some meaningful testimony. We all deserve a break today, and Mr. Meyer, if you can provide us with that effort, we certainly would like to get your insight on where you see the challenges facing making that food available for the American consumer. You may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Costa. Hello, my name is Ernie Meyer, and I'm the Director of Quality, U.S. Supply Chain for McDonald's USA. And I'm the current chair of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs, which I'll refer to as the Roundtable, or U.S. RSPE going forward. As a multi-stakeholder, independent, and nonprofit organization, the Roundtable was put together to represent the entire supply chain of U.S. poultry and egg industries. We are grateful for the invitation to speak with the subcommittee and share what we've learned facing the same issues you are as a subcommittee and as representatives. We currently have full-time membership commitments from almost 100 farms, organizations, and individuals, with national and international business reach that include more than 500 individual experts. They range across all disciplines of our business, from those that directly care for birds to companies like McDonald's, offering poultry and egg products to our end customers. Each of these individuals is plugged into the Roundtable and working on our shared goal to continuously improve the sustainability of U.S. poultry and egg supply chains. We believe that the most successful sustainable tools are created by both those implementing them and those impacted by them. Every member has an equal vote in our structure to allow optimal collaboration, and much of our work is open to public input. We are driven by a diverse group with varying resources and sizes. For more than 3 years, farmers, integrators, researchers, grocery stores, animal health companies, environmental groups, equipment companies, and restaurant chains have actively been working to build the connections and tools we need to help meet modern food system challenges and continuously improve our sustainability. Our approach to sustainability is pragmatic and holistic. We work to identify solutions that are environmentally sound, socially responsible, and economically viable. What's unique about the Roundtable is that we are a community and catalyst for progress. We are encouraging improvement by helping facilitate connections, providing access to expertise, and remove barriers to advancements without ostracizing stakeholders. The most effective sustainability strategies are based on sound data and comprehensive, repeatable measurements. The Roundtable and its members have invested their own significant time and resources into developing the first ever full supply chain sustainability framework for U.S. chicken, turkey, and eggs, which I'll refer to going forward as the framework. We completed the development process in December last year and are at full speed to create the software tool to collect the data within this year. And there's a lot of data to collect. The scale and importance of poultry in the diet of Americans and our world continues to grow. Poultry is the most consumed protein due to its accessibility to all cultures, affordability in relation to its nutrition, and ease for at-home cooking and quick service food. It's also a pillar for the food and agricultural industry, generating more than $576 billion in annual economic impact and $41.9 billion in taxes, with more than 2 million workers employed by the poultry and egg supply chains. What shifted lately is the push up and down supply chain. It's not enough for us to have fantastic sustainability programs at McDonald's and at our suppliers. We must have everything put together from the very beginning, from the feed for the birds and to the delivery of our food across the country. McDonald's has taken learnings from the roundtable and committed and invested millions of dollars in partnership programs with its suppliers to increase the sustainability of its poultry supply chain. One example of this is the Roundtable Partnership and the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs Sustainability Framework. Another project example is the Smart Broiler Project, focused on innovation in outcomes-based poultry welfare assessments. I share this with you today to offer some good news and reassurance that the entire poultry supply chain is behind proactively improving and communicating about their sustainability, not resisting it. In poultry, we are not divided by industry or discipline, but have found a way to work together at a higher pre-competitive level to find the paths that work for everyone. McDonald's is proud to be part of this rapidly growing organization and its projects, and to speak with you about this work. From investing in renewable energy and partnering with organizations such as the Roundtable to advance sustainability and regenerative agricultural practices, we also want to help protect our planet for communities today and in the future. Your effort to secure funding at the direction that provide resources to the #1 most consumed protein in the United States will be put to good use and amplified by independent efforts like those of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs. I'll do my best to entertain questions you have. I have specific areas I can speak to in my position and experience, and I'll take any questions that I cannot answer back to the Roundtable and tap into our community of experts for more information. Thank you for your time and interest in the U.S. and poultry egg sector.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Meyer, for providing that perspective with the egg and poultry section and the issue of sustainability, which is obviously the subject matter of our hearing today, and environmental gain and economic viability. You did reference on a number of your comments the supply chain challenges we face. And while it's not the subject matter of today's hearing, we have all been dealing over the last 20 plus months of this pandemic of the impacts, especially early on when we closed schools and restaurants, and really taking a very complicated and complex supply chain for our America's food and turning it upside down. And certainly there's been lessons to learn from that. But we're now in the phase of the subcommittee hearing that I enjoy, where members of the committee get a chance to ask questions or make comments to the various witnesses that we've had here this morning. And you've all done an excellent job. I want to thank each of you for your testimony this morning. As by tradition, we will recognize members in the order that they have come to participate with the committee, and committee staff has a list of all of you who are very patient in listening and waiting for your opportunity to ask questions, to make comments. I will begin as the chair with recognizing myself for 5 minutes, and then refer to the ranking member for his 5 minutes, and then we will alternate as is tradition, Democrat, Republican, until all the members of the subcommittee have had an opportunity, and the full committee that are participating, to exercise the time available to them. As I mentioned previously, climate change obviously impacts not only regions of our country, but regions of the world, given weather patterns and geographies. So we continue to learn more each day on how we mitigate the impacts of these climate change. My first question is to Mr. Medeiros. As a producer, you, as noted, are stewards of the land, you and your family, and you've made many changes in terms of your dairy operation. What USDA tools or programs do you think have been most critical in helping you accomplish these goals and reducing greenhouse gases and nitrate issues with your water? And how can we improve those efforts in next year's Farm Bill?
Well, great question, Jim. And I'm going to go back in history a little bit. I was actually 2005. I had applied for an NRCS grant and put together probably one of the first nutrient management programs on my dairy, and at that time. And so I was one of the first dairies to do that. And right at first, climate change and none of that was on the radar yet. And well, through that NRCS program, I was able to implement a nutrient management program and started to see the benefits of being able to move manure in a more efficient way across my farm, and able to capture those benefits on my farm from reducing my methane output, and being able to utilize that nutrient management program on my crops and better utilize that. So, funding through NRCS, EQIP programs, those are all extremely valuable tools for producers today. And going forward, we need that funding to continue, because, one shoe doesn't fit all. We've got to remember that digesters will not end up in every dairy because it's just not economical feasible. But there's so many other things we can do in our industry through manure management and through technology. We figured out there's ways that we can move manure, separate manure, and apply manure so much more efficient today and utilize those benefits on our farms. And with collaborating with NRCS and the EQIP programs, those gives us the resources to where we can do it on a volunteer basis and address all these climate changes that we're facing.
Well, Melvin, I'm going to have to come out and see some of the changes you've made there, and let's try to schedule that soon. Ms. Burrows, you talked about being at the front line of climate change as farmers, using sustainable practices that has made your farm more resilient. How do you think they can be scaled up on a larger basis as we look at, again, next year's Farm Bill? You're muted here, Rosie.
Okay, thank you. Okay, before I answer your good question, I wanted to first compliment all the others that have testified and thank them for those wonderful comments. I especially like Kim, because we have been a ranching family for over a century as well. In terms of all the different programs that are available and the practices that we're using, they are all part of the solution. But the first thing that has to happen is education. So research and education are the most important things to have these practices work throughout the nation. And it isn't a cookie cutter. So what works in one particular area may not work in another. But these practices can be implemented across the nation. I think that the one thing that has to change is our paradigm of feeding cows. Our cows, both dairy and beef, are grazers. And I believe that God had created this symbiotic relationship between cows, grass, and the sun. And I think that depending on what your certain farm or ranch is, every one of these practices that we talked about can all be implemented, and it's through education.
Well, we appreciate that. And finally, Ms. Dr. Stackhouse Lawson, you talked in your testimony about trying to develop ways to more accurately measure issues of emissions and develop strategies that in fact can achieve goals of reducing those emissions. How do you think we best fund that effort in quantifying our data in ways that are meaningful as we try to improve our impacts as it relates to emissions. And what is your university and other universities doing together? And I think we need to be combining resources, frankly, as we try to achieve these goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we really think about measuring greenhouse gases from these systems and actually trying to quantify the gas, it's really complicated, right? So we know that, of course, methane is produced from ruminant systems. They belch that methane. It's, of course, a natural process of the animal's digestive capacity. We know that based on different diets, those animals have different amounts of the gas that they will emit, right? If we're measuring that on, for example, on a dry matter intake basis or something. But the challenge that we've had as scientists is that our methods that we use to measure these things, up until very recently, we had to put animals in chambers or their heads, right, in respiration chambers with head box. We would use very tame animals, but we would sort of encapsulate their heads so that we could understand the emissions, or we would put them in whole animal chambers. And when we do that, it changes the animal's behavior and their desire to eat, right? They're just not, they continue to eat. But they're not eating as much. And so we believe that a more accurate representation of what the animal is actually emitting in their production environment is very important. And the other thing we don't understand is, how does that change, right? So how is it different on Kim's ranch in the forages that she has available in Idaho versus what Rosie has and the forages that her grazing animals are consuming? And generally, we think that there may even be differences, right? And so the levers that Kim and may be able to pull on Brackett ranches to reduce either enteric emissions or reduce nitrogen emissions may be different than the levers that Rosie can pull reasonably, right? And we need to make sure that we understand those baseline emissions, but also how solutions can be applied in a way that is place-based, because I think we've heard that over and over and over again, right? Well, one size fits all approach is just, it doesn't work in animal agriculture systems. And how do we balance? I think there's a really good point. How do we balance knowing everything that we possibly can, because that's also not reasonable. That's an unreasonable expectation, with the amount of knowledge that we need to move forward with the most appropriate strategies. To answer your question about other universities, we have a new program that has started. We're developing strategic partnerships with other institutions that have complementary facilities so actually different facilities to ours. So one example would be, we're setting up a green feed platform where we'll have 6 green feeds in what we're going to call climate smart pens. But we're partnering with Texas Tech, for example, who has the head box chambers, or we might partner with Davis that has the more full animal chamber approach. And I do believe that we also need to be very smart and not duplicating, right, these very precious resources, and really work together to develop.
Doctor, I think your comments are well taken, and my time is more than expired, but I wanted to make sure that we got an opportunity to get the academic perspective in here. And I really do believe, as we look toward money is always a challenge as we try to provide ample resources, but that we combine our research efforts in ways that make sense through the academic, incredible academic resource that we have in this country on a regional basis. So without further ado, my friend and ranking member of the subcommittee, Dusty Johnson, it's your opportunity here with your 5 minutes. Look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just great witnesses. I mean, really, really a top-notch panel, and you can tell how much they agree on. And these are happy, optimistic, solutions-focused people who want to make the world a better place, and they've just all done a great job. I'll start with Ms. Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson, and then we'll go to Ms. Brackett, kind of with a similar set of questions. I thought your testimony, Doc, did a good job of talking about the progress that we've made, as well as some of the ambitious, proactive goals that our country has on a go-forward basis. And in that, we want to feed the world. We want to do so sustainably. In that kind of a landscape, it seems that we should be doing everything we can to have American producers feed even more of the world, because we do it better. We do it more sustainably. I feel like so often these producers have a target on their back rather than being viewed as the solution. Just sort of your reactions about that.
I think one of the things that I didn't mention in the testimony, but is really important, is that sustainability is certainly has this triple bottom line approach, right, of environmental, social, and economic. And we need to take that into account as we're thinking about nutrition globally. But the other thing that I didn't mention that sustainability has is an emotional element, right? So when people think about the way that they define sustainability and what may be most important to them, emotions play a role in that. And some of the perceptions that exist around our production systems today are challenging and in some ways align with the science that we know, and in others don't. So I think Representative Johnson, it's very challenging, and I think our farmers and ranchers should be commended for the incredible work that they have done. But this sort of target on their back, unfortunately, oftentimes makes it difficult for I think all of the great minds that we have that could come together to really identify collaborative solutions moving forward. And I very much agree with you that those collaborative solutions are necessary and that our farmers and ranchers should be a part of those conversations, because at the end of the day, they're the boots on the ground that will mitigate the impact.
And so, and listen, tell me if I'm looking at this too simplistically, because I suppose sometimes elected officials do that, right? But if we really care about, I think so many people are making it seem as though producers need to do less, right? We need fewer of that type of production or less of that kind of production. When in reality, if we care about sustainability, a really effective solution would be to ask the American producers to do even more to help feed the world.
Right, and I think we will get there. You described some of the technology that South Dakota State is implementing on precision ranching technologies. I'm equally excited about that technology, right? So could we actually, with a phone app, move cattle to a place on a ranch at the right time the forage is growing and optimize the landscape and the nutrition and also minimize that impact, right? Because then you can move them off potentially during, if there's perhaps a migrant bird that needs to nest in that particular environment, right? So our ability to move virtual fences without actually building fence is, it's phenomenal. And the opportunity to get even more utilization off of landscapes, but actually enhance the landscape, I think is very real. And I think technology is only going to enhance that for us. I think at the same time, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that measurements to continually benchmark ourselves, but then document improvement will continue to be important.
Great, thanks, Doc. And then I've got 50 seconds left. Ms. Brackett, it is yours. Any observations?
Well, I would concur with what Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson has said. I think to add on to that, I would go back to your comments about the efficiency of the U.S. beef production system. Cattle are upcyclers. I think sometimes people don't recognize that most cattle ranches exist on land that's considered marginal. It can't grow crops for human consumption. So cattle can go in there and graze that grass that's not human edible, and they convert that into highly nutritious form of protein for our fellow Americans. I think that's really important. The other thing, when we talk about cattle diet, they also consume a lot of our human food waste that would otherwise go into a landfill. So they are definitely upcyclers in several segments of our industry.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thanks, gentlemen, always for his good questions. And upcyclers, I like that term, Ms. Brackett. I'll have to remember that. It's not one that I've used. But our next member to be recognized is the gentlewoman from Virginia, my friend, Ms. Abigail Spanberger. Representative Spanberger, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Costa. I am so thrilled that we are having this hearing on livestock and conservation today. I am the chairwoman of the Conservation and Forestry Subcommittee, and I know that our producers across the country, and particularly in Virginia, are really the original conservationists. I'm also very excited about today's hearing because of the large presence of livestock producers in Virginia, many of whom are actively engaged in USDA conservation programs. In December, I was proud to host USDA leaders in Orange County, Virginia, in my district, to meet with Virginia livestock producers, and I heard directly from cattlemen and small processors about their most pressing needs. They discussed the recently announced USDA investments that will help keep America's cattlemen and their families competitive in a global ag economy, and it was a really wonderful, wonderful way to focus on these programs and the value that they have to our producers. One way our producers stay competitive is by bringing conservation practices into their day-to-day operations. That's why I'm proud to co-sponsor the bipartisan Growing Climate Solutions Act, with my colleague, Congressman Bacon. It touches on nearly every sector of agriculture, including livestock production, and this legislation would help Virginia cattle and poultry producers receive additional revenue sources for the climate smart practices that they are already embracing. The bill is supported by nearly every major American farm group, many major environmental groups, and several Fortune 500 companies because it makes sense. Notably, the bill passed the United States Senate with 92 senators voting in favor of it, and it continues to stun me that the House of Representatives has failed to act on a bill that garners so much support. We don't see that every day, and we should pass it in our chamber. It is crucial for the farmers, the rural communities, and the health of our planet, particularly the farmers and producers in Virginia who are advocating for it. It's certainly long past time. So thank you for allowing me that moment. But Mr. Medeiros, I have a question about your testimony, because you mentioned that current USDA programs have not focused enough on manure and feed management. And that's really a key area of opportunity and some sustainability questions related to dairy production. I've heard that while USDA has strong internal expertise on conservation, that we really need more experts on conservation practices and innovation specifically related to livestock. Could you perhaps share your experience and what you've experienced and provide us with any sort of feedback on what that looks like from your perspective?
Sure. And, Dr. Stackhouse talked a little bit about, different feeds and knowing how that rumen's going to react to the different feeds and what it's actually emitting. So in the dairy sector out here in California, we feed about 40% of our rations are byproducts. And through those byproducts, we really don't know how much emission reductions we're getting through those byproducts. So the question is still out there. And at UC Davis, there's been a lot of studies done on either oil-based additives, plant-based additives, and how that is working in reducing emissions. So we need more funding to go into that category. And then we need less restrictions from FDA when they take a look at those additives, because they're looking at that as an antibiotic and having to go through that process. It's cumbersome. It takes a long time, and time is of the essence, right? And some of that stuff, we need to streamline that process.
And some of the additives that you're talking about that are being compared or judged as antibiotics some of them are kind of natural plant-based. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. They're either oil-based or plant-based. One of them was seaweed, right? Yeah. And so when we take a look at these options, we need to streamline that process, and we need to actually put more funding towards that, because companies, when they start taking a look at the process, they're not willing to invest, right? It's taking too long. It's too expensive. So those are the avenues, because we have to remember 45% of emissions coming from a cow is enteric. Yep. And we have to remember, especially in the dairy sector, not everybody's going to be able to put a digester. And if we can target 45% of that emissions on the enteric basis, that is extremely valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Medeiros. You mentioned digesters, and I have the REAP Improvement Act would expand eligibility to the REAP program to include agricultural producer cooperatives that want to meet the high demand for the program by increasing the available cost share, particularly as it relates to digesters. I'm running out of time, but I will be following up with questions for the record for Dr. Stackhouse Lawson related to the REAP program and what additional access might look like. particularly for livestock producers and our dairy industry. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for this fantastic hearing, and thank you to all of our witnesses for your work and the knowledge you brought to us today.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Spanberger, and your focus with your own subcommittee and how we can collaborate together with efforts on conservation. And we look toward next year's Farm Bill is, I think, critical for all of us in terms of working with America's livestock industry to achieve even better results. So our next witness is ranking member of the full committee. I introduced him once before, so I don't think I need to introduce him again. My friend, Representative Thompson from Pennsylvania. Need to unmic, GT.
Got it. Jim, thank you so much. Thank you to you and our ranking member for just assembling just a tremendous panel on this topic. Just outstanding. I get to listen to these folks all day long. These are the types of voices that we need to have as we prepare for the 2023 Farm Bill. While many in this space of sustainability climate, while many private companies have made major climate commitments, they oftentimes are struggling to find ways really to achieve their goals. And I think to achieve their goals in truly meaningful ways that are effective that align with their goal, despite having significant financial resources. And simultaneously, USDA conservation programs, and I would put our agriculture committee at the forefront of that, because we have authorized what it is at USDA in the conservation space. Specifically, those conservation programs are oversubscribed, and agriculture producers have difficulty accessing these vital programs. So for these reasons, I introduced the Sustains Act, which would allow USDA to accept and match donated private funds to stretch the federal dollar. The idea is that the third parties could really be able to demonstrate their climate credentials. They could be climate champions by when they directly partner with USDA to fund conservation projects, more conservation projects, and expand those through the existing programs. I think in terms of land-based solutions, we see that the documentation shows that overall our farmers, ranchers, foresters sequester 6.1 gigatons of carbon annually, greenhouse gas emissions. And that's the research goes to show that there's that sequesters every bit that's emitted plus an additional little over 10%, which is very exciting. It shows that our farmers, ranchers, foresters are climate heroes. But we can do better, because we know that there's new innovations because American agriculture is science and technology and innovation. So I want to start with Mr. Meyer or whoever would like to respond. I'm just curious, do you see a value in the concept where we form a public-private partnership to where those organizations of all sizes, not just large corporations, but small mom and pop businesses that would like to get their climate champion credentials could help us fund additional conservation programs? Do you see any value in that concept, and would appreciate your insights?
This is Rosie Burrows, and I would like to share that I think it's an outstanding idea, and we need all hands on deck, all feet working towards solving our problems. So any and everything working towards the good of and I'd like to change it not just to sustainability, but to viability. And it's about the health of our planet. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that kind of approach, a public-private partnership approach to expanding our conservation programs that we may have, programs through the USDA?
Okay.
I think this type of legislation could be helpful. But one thing to keep in mind is that the programs are built for producers. So that means the underlying USDA conservation programs must be accessible to poultry producers and provide the environmental performance to drive results towards goals per dollar invested. And we're supportive of those practices and technologies.
Well, Ms. Meyer, I agree with you. I mean, we need to look at the program so that all of our producers are benefiting, whether we're talking crops, trees or livestock. So, because they all have something to offer, right? For tremendous forces for good for the economy and the environment.
Yeah, if I could add, I love the notion of this private-public partnership idea, and I truly believe that that's where our solutions are going to come, and those tangible outcomes are going to be made available. If I could just provide just a few things that I think if you could add, the ability to actually measure the outcome that we have achieved, I think would be really powerful, right? So if we have these climate champions and they could say they've reduced X amount of tons, or they've helped sequester X amount of tons, I think that that would be really helpful for a lot of these more corporate strategies. The other thing that I might encourage is, it's certainly climate. I love the sort of name of climate champion, but it might also be really interesting to also measure the improvements in water holding capacity and soil health more broadly, and even biodiversity in the soil, right? Because I think as we begin to improve soil health and sequester soil organic carbon, we see all these other really phenomenal wins, right? And it would be, I think that that's where value lies as well.
No, absolutely. Thank you to the panel, and Chairman, thank you for for convening this, and I'll yield back.
You're welcome, and the gentleman has always appreciated his participation. And Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson, we appreciate your enthusiasm. We need more of that. I hope it spreads to. I know many of the members of the subcommittee certainly are expressing their enthusiasm as it relates to today's hearing. Our next representative, my friend from Connecticut, who is very focused on these issues, Representative Hayes, please, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Costa, and thank you for having this hearing today. Connecticut's 5th District is a hotbed of sustainable livestock farming. There are countless farmers from my district who operate small family dairy farms with a focus on sustainable and organic agriculture. One example is Adama Farms, a diverse direct market farm and educational program in Falls Village, Connecticut. Adama is part of Hazon, a national organization which advocates for agricultural and environmentally sustainability in connection with the Jewish faith. And then there's Laurelbrook Farm, a 4th generation 1,100 cow dairy farm, which makes sustainability center of their practices by composting manure and reselling the product as organic fertilizer to the local community. The owner of Laurelbrook is Kristen Jacquier. He's also the chairman of the Agromark Dairy Cooperative and is extremely active in the Connecticut dairy community. In Connecticut, rather than treating sustainability as an afterthought, our farmers know that good stewardship over our land and environment must be central to all agricultural practices. However, Connecticut family farms are struggling. Consolidation in the dairy industry has hit us hard, leaving Connecticut with fewer than 100 remaining dairy farms, having lost nearly 200 in the past decade. My questions today are for Ms. Burrows. Given that you run a diversified, sustainable farm similar to those in my district, can you share details about the effect of consolidation on the uptake of sustainable practices throughout the livestock sector? Specifically, what are the implications that larger operations pose for the adoption of sustainability measures?
Thank you, Representative Hayes, for the question. I think it's the key to our future to have the ranchers and farmers and grazers that are able to utilize their farms and ranches in a way that protects the environment and brings health to the planet. There are more microbes in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on the planet. And these microbes, with the symbiotic relationship between animal grazing and the land, they create the water infiltration system that replenishes the aquifers when it does rain. And when we lose a farmer to his farm or land because of consolidation or because of efficiency in bigger, more corporate type of farms, We've lost our farms and ranchers forever. They will not ever get an opportunity to come back. We ourselves have had 2 grass-based organic dairies, and they were the premier grazing dairies that work beautifully. And we could show you all the research and the good things about it. But the economic, and I like this, that what Kim said, the economic viability did not work because we do not have an equal playing field when the NOP has not enforced the pasture rule uniformly across the nation. And Congress has directed the NOP to publish the final rule on origin of livestock, but the NOP has not done that. So number one, we need an equal playing field so that those of us that are using grazing practices can be rewarded by the consumers who support and businesses that support our type of farming that is bringing benefits to the planet and health to all people, from the birds in the air to the microbes in the soil. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burrows. I'm smiling because my next question was, how would finalizing the NOP help organic farmers avoid similar outcomes than the one you experienced with your organic farms? And you led right into it because it's all connected. Exactly what you have just talked about is what I'm hearing from small farmers in Connecticut. Our landscape in my district is just outlined and created by the farmers, their investments in the communities, what they do for neighbors, for our schools, our agroscience programs, and it would be devastating for Connecticut's 5th district for these farmers to not be sustainable and for us to continue to lose at the rate that we've been losing. So thank you so much for your work in this area and for your very thoughtful comments. Mr. Chair, that's all I have. I yield back.
Thanks, gentlewoman from Connecticut, for your comments and your insight. Our next member is the gentleman from Indiana, Representative Jim Baer, who represents the 4th Congressional District, I believe. Good to have you involved, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. And I really want to add my appreciation to all the witnesses here today. The expertise they bring to this committee is really beneficial to our ability to make decisions as we talk about the Farm Bill. And, you know, we've heard several people mention, not only the witnesses, but as committee members talk about the significant improvement that agriculture has made in almost 50 years, 70 years, of 287% increase with very little change in the kinds of inputs that we put into agriculture. So I'm really glad that we're giving farmers and ranchers the credit they deserve for all the conservation efforts and the things that are important to maintaining our environment. And you know, the things that there's many things I would love to talk about, like soil health, grazing management, nutrient management, feed additives, methane digesters. Maybe I'll have a chance to get to some of those. But one area that we haven't talked about, I'm not sure how much interest some people have, but I'm very excited about biotech and the potential that these technologies will have in benefiting the environment, and not only the environment, but the human and animal health and the world's demand for sustainability produced protein. So these technologies could be beneficial to cattle and the dairy industry, with researchers and companies developing gene-edited traits for heat tolerance. And by using biotech to breed cattle to carry a heat tolerance gene called SLIC, we can have cattle that are better able to regulate body temperature during periods of heat stress than non-SLIC cattle, and helping them maintain productivity. So, Mr. Medeiros, I'm going to start with you, and then Ms. Brackett will follow up. But can you touch on your respective industry's view to the benefits of biotech in all this discussion?
Well, absolutely. And being a representative from Indiana, you see a lot of the biotech and seeds and crop rotations, and we see it out west also, and the benefits it brings to the environment. From an animal aspect, I'll share a little story with you. I'm a diehard Holstein guy that has changed his mind, and let me elaborate on that. And we talk about heat tolerance and all that. I have switched to Jersey breeds on one of my farms, and one of the things I notice is the tolerance that they have to heat is much greater than a Holstein, and then their impact, their footprint on the environment is much less than the Holstein. So we have found, just through our own research on our own farm, the benefits of just changing the breed on how that has impacted our footprint on the environment. So, it's little things like that. And then, we'll take it as far as into crop rotation on biotech corn and tolerance to droughts. And, we know all about droughts out here in California. So, sustainability goes anywhere from emissions from that cow to water, right? And we want to encompass all that in our operations. So we take a look at all that in our operations. So that's some of the stuff that we address in our operations is breeds and of course our crop rotations.
Well, thank you very much for that insight. Very informative information there. Ms. Brackett, would you care to address that same concern?
Certainly. Thank you, Representative Baird. I would definitely echo Mr. Madero's comments on breed selection. That is so critical in the cattle industry that you match the breed to the climate that you live in, the region of the country that you're in. So I would say that's probably the first, it might be an old school technology, but an important one for us. In the cattle industry, another important biotech would be feed additives. We've talked a lot about feed additives to reduce methane emissions. I think that one there's a lot of interest going on, some exciting research in that area. When we talk about technology in the cattle industry, we also talk broader than just biotech. We have a need for, Representative Johnson mentioned his precision grazing technology. So that's also really exciting to us. And I think finally, I would just mention that we need to be spending this time on updating our emissions science, getting that baseline and understanding where we need to go from here.
Well, thank you very much. And I see my time's almost up, and I don't think the chairman will give me any more time. And I have all kinds of questions, and I would enjoy visiting with all of you for the rest of the day. But thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman's always welcomed, and certainly you'll have an opportunity, as all members of the committee do, to submit further questions to our witnesses. And I agree with you. As others have stated, we've got a great group of witnesses here today, and not enough time for all of us to ask additional questions that we would like to ask. Our next member is the gentlewoman from Iowa's 3rd District, and another friend, Representative Cindy Axne. You're recognized for 5 minutes, Representative Axne.
Thank you, Chairman Costa, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. And Rep. Baird, you and I seem to always be on the same pathway of questions, so maybe we'll get some more of your answers on some of mine here. But since I came to Congress, I've been a very strong supporter of sustainable ag practices for our farmers. We know how important it is. I know right here in Iowa that our family farmers are the original conservationists, and their kids really literally depend on them doing so. So we know also that consumers are becoming more increasingly aware and interested in how their food is being grown, where it's coming from, how sustainable it is, all of that. I was recently out in Council Bluffs, Iowa with Secretary Vilsack, and we were at a producer's shop. As a matter of fact, the owners told us that they were meeting this demand by providing information to their consumers on where their beef comes from farm to table. And it was so cool to talk to their kids who have put together the QR codes where they track every animal, and then their customers can see from birth to table what that animal's been up to. So they're really looking for these things. And I think our young farmers and producers are ready to be at the table with this. While our family farmers have continually been more efficient and sustainable over these last few decades, though, this market trend will provide more opportunities for farmers who are on the cutting edge of sustainability and further incentivize those who want to do more. And as we look towards this upcoming farm bill that we're talking about, Congress needs to be investing in more resources towards conservation programs for research and technical assistance, et cetera. And we need our farmers to be able to take advantage of this growing market to help our country reduce its emissions. So my first question is to you, Dr. Stackhouse-Lawson. In your testimony, you referenced numerous research gaps, limited funding, and other challenges in improving sustainability. In your view, what's the most pressing research need, and how would that research help our producers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Really establishing appropriate baselines for greenhouse gas emissions in the way that cattle are raised today, in my opinion, is what is most needed right now. So we've modeled this for a very long time, of course, using emissions data, but the actual absolute emissions that we use to factor, right, create those emission factors are based on data from past equipment, right? So putting those animals in respiration chambers or whole animal chambers. And I'm worried we're not getting accurate baseline emissions from the types of cattle that we have today. What that'll also allow us to do is begin to, and I'm very excited about this and was inspired by the previous question as well, begin to potentially genotype animals that actually might have less methane emissions, even on the same diet, right? So I think there's just such a gap in sort of our actual knowledge of what these animals are doing in their natural environments, what animals are performing better, I have big questions around, are the efficiency metrics we're using today, are they the right ones? Is there another efficiency metric? Is there a nutrient efficiency metric, right? That we've just missed because we haven't had that technology or those resources at our fingertips. So, as this technology catches up, and we're hopeful that even technology from measuring methane emissions from the oil and gas industry, could we translate some of that? And we're very close. I think we're very close to it catching up. And so just really building that database would be my recommendation as a really good starting place.
Well, as somebody who comes from the world of strategy, baseline numbers are the most important piece to start with. And if we don't even have that, then we do need to put some effort towards that. I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. Ms. Burrows, you stated that management intensive grazing is the key to the future. Could you expand on that? What benefits have you seen on your farm? You mentioned that you needed a level playing field. So what specific challenges do you think are most important to address for producers in adopting that practice?
Thank you for the question. There's three kind of areas that I'll hit. In regards to the NOP making their final rule on the origin of livestock rule, that is in reference to grazing animals in the dairy sector. In terms of grazing beef out on the rangeland, there's lots of research, and there's a holistic many holistic programs on management intensive grazing. What we found, when I said earlier in our testimony 40 years ago, we didn't know what we didn't know, is that God created a perfect universe. And if we work with Mother Nature in the cycle of the seasons and adapting, like what was said earlier, the cattle to the environment of what you have, whether you're in a mountain range or a desert area, those are all the decisions that need to be made to be efficient and viable of grazing your animals. We also graze sheep, and sheep are an animal that our country has sort of left behind, but sheep are a wonderful grazer, and we're using them in our orchards. So what we have found is that when we integrate grazing into our farming systems of our orchards, we are finding that relationship is completely, has so many benefits. I would love to write more of a written, detailed answer to that as time has been limited. But I can say that when things are in cycle and animals' manure goes into the soil and is utilized, you're not going to have problems with nitrate concentration from grain-fed animals that are in a concentrated form. So in my view, right now, our whole food system is broken. We've gone to cheap food. We've gone to food that's imported. We need to take care of our American farmer rancher first. Buy local, buy organically grazed grown meat. We know that the CLAs and all the benefits in the health of the meat that's on grazing animals is so much more important for our health and fighting cancer. So I would love to write a more detailed answer to that. But I just think working with Mother Nature is the relationship of what we all need to be striving to do. Because when we are in sync, then we're able to reduce all those greenhouse gases, all of the store carbon in the soil, and hold water in our and recharge our aquifers. It's very exciting. I can say that seeing what was in a dead soil and what is in a live soil and having life, and we've planted rows of hedgerows throughout all of our farms for beneficials, for all
Rosie?
Yep. Okay, I will finish it off in a written testimony. Thank you.
Well, and we both appreciate Representative Axey and Rosie, your enthusiasm as chairperson of a Soils Caucus. We need to bring you back. I've never seen such enthusiasm for soils, and we'll continue that in that vein. Next member, representative from Iowa, again, the 4th Congressional District. A gentleman who's very focused on these issues, Mr. Representative Randy Finstra.
Thank you, Chairman Costa and Ranking Member Johnson, and thanks for everybody's testimony. It's really quite amazing to hear everybody and what their thoughts and what we can do together collaboratively. In Iowa, the livestock industry has a great story to tell when it comes to sustainability. You know, across the Iowa industry, farmers are producing more while using less. Our hog producers are using 75% less land and 25% less water compared to 6 decades ago. Dairy farms in the U.S. have the lowest greenhouse gas emissions of all our global competitors. Cattle ranchers have reduced emissions per pound of beef by more than 40%, while also producing 60% more beef per animal from 1961 to 2018. Through these technologies, the livestock industry has achieved these goals, and it is through technology that we continue to make improvements into the future. One technology that has advanced the industry into greater sustainability is feed additives. Mr. Medeiros and Mrs. Brackett, in your testimonies, you shared how animal feed ingredients have allowed the dairy and beef sectors to reduce methane emissions. I share your concerns that the regulatory red tape is preventing timely market availability for these ingredients. According to a study by Informa Economics, it takes about 3 to 5 years for a feed ingredient to be reviewed by the Centers for Veterinary Medicine. Why is it important that the Food and Drug Administration streamline this review and approval process? And what legislative proposals do you encourage Congress to consider related to this issue, Mr. Medeiros?
Okay, well, first of all, we need to separate the feed additives from the antibiotic category, and so we can start fast forwarding what we know so far and promote research and to get this on a fast track. That's probably the one thing that's really hindering feed additives today. And then we need to spend more time and investment into that category, because I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done in that category where we can understand it. I mean, Dr. Stockhouse Larson touched upon it a little bit. So FDA needs to take a look at that, the protocol on feed additives, so we can pursue that at a much rapid rate and push that forward. So, that's my opinion on that. And I think it's something that Congress really needs to take a look at.
Yeah. Ms. Brackett, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you, Representative. I appreciate the question. I think it's important to focus on innovation. Having support for research and innovation as opposed to regulation would be something that we're very much in favor of. Investing in research that's going to help producers be more solutions oriented, I would think would be the collaborative goal that we're all striving to achieve here, especially if we're talking about feed additives, having more research in that arena, supporting innovation so that we can be more technologically advanced and achieve our climate goals. Absolutely.
Thank you for those comments. And got another question. Dr. Stackhouse Lawson, I sit on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and I passed an amendment to include animal omics database in the Bioeconomy Research and Development Act. This amendment ensures that animal omics databases are included in research and development initiatives, allowing data access that focus on animal biotechnology and genetic modification. How do you see biotechnology fitting into the overall strategy for meeting food demands and in a growing population and to achieve our sustainability goals?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but I think when we think about really achieving sustainability goals, so much of the progress to date has been made through enhanced efficiencies. And yes, we have to do more, right? There has to be more than those enhanced efficiencies, but we also need to develop technologies and tools to even streamline the efficiencies, right? And so I think any access to data and technology to help do more with less, to help our producers have more appropriate tools that can work on their individual operations, but still drive to these, bigger goals that we have is where we all need to think about innovating. And, the beautiful thing about sustainability and quite frankly, climate is that any improvements we make, right, are help, right? And they may not help as much as we think we want them to, but they still help. So I think those efforts are warranted.
I agree. And the reality is our livestock industry has voluntarily adopted sustainability practices, which I'm so excited about. With that, my time has ended. Thank you, and I yield back.
We thank the gentleman, and we thank, again, our witnesses. Our next member is my friend, Representative Bobby Rush from Illinois' 1st Congressional District, and we appreciate Congress member Rush's always participation. He represents the heart of one of America's urban areas, but yet understands the importance of American agriculture and the role that it plays. And that will be followed by Representative Barry Moore from Alabama. But Bobby, you're next up.
Well, I certainly want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been a very, very informative hearing, and I thank you for it. I want to take a moment to welcome, if I might, Mr. Meyer, who is here with us today from my hometown, Chicago. And Mr. Banderas, I have a question for you. I'm extremely interested in member cooperatives, and I am looking forward to ways to expand ag co-ops to urban areas, as I believe that their structure and their mission uniquely empowers producers in a variety of ways. And I know that this is not the topic of today's hearing, but I wanted to take the privilege and the opportunity and the hope that you could briefly discuss some of the best practices that you have witnessed as a member of the National Milk Producers Federation's Executive Committee. And if you could particularly inform me about the practices that you have seen that could help co-ops expand into new sectors, such as urban ag. Mr. Banderas, will you respond?
Yes. So little history about myself. I used to be an independent producer at one time and learned the value of a co-op. And, co-ops bring such a tremendous value to American agriculture. The resources that a co-op can bring to producers, as far as, and I'll speak upon DFA. DFA being the largest dairy co-op in the United States and I believe the 4th largest milk processor in the world. The resources that co-ops bring to producers through a co-op, we have our farm service program, we have our innovation programs, and co-ops bring such a value to agriculture clear across the United States, whether you're a corn grower, a beef producer, dairy industry. It is a vital component of producers and having the ability to use co-ops to reach out to people, educate people, and bring resources back to the farmer. And we're independent, as an independent producer, you don't get those same resources. So I think co-ops is probably one of the most valuable tools in today's agriculture. And, hopefully it keeps growing and expanding. And that way we can touch even the cities and be able to touch city farmers and the city population understands the value that a co-op can bring to producers and all of society through all the assets and who we touch in the industry.
Well, I certainly would like to engage in this conversation more with you because, again, I'm absolutely committed to the idea and the potential of trying to create a unity of will, a unity of spirit, and a unity of understanding in terms of the whole cooperative sector of our society. So thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Rush. And our next members in the order that the staff has provided me is Representative Barry Moore from Alabama's 2nd Congressional District, then to be followed by Representative Sanford Bishop from Georgia's 2nd. Mr. Moore, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we've heard a lot of talk about grazing and cattle, but Mr. Meyer, I want to talk a little bit about poultry industry. That's a big thing in our part of the world and huge in agriculture in Alabama. So you focused a lot of your testimony in terms of working on measurement. In the National Council Broiler Sustainability Report released last year, I'm reading that in just 10 years, the industry's decreased land use by 13%, carbon emissions by 18%, water consumption by 13%, and fossil fuel use by 22%. Can you expand on this, and what do you attribute these gains to, please?
Thank you, Representative Moore. The poultry industry has made incredible strides over the past decade and has been a shining light in the agriculture industry in that space. And the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs, we're really focused on getting a baseline measurement in a broader aspect of every node of the supply chain involved in that sustainability conversation. So we've involved producers, integrators, allied industry, as well as NGOs and restaurants in building our framework. The framework is completed in December, and this year we're going to launch the tool that we'll use, and it'll be an online tool. That way, all of these nodes can input their aspects of sustainability measurements into that, and we'll have a good baseline across the full supply chain from producer all the way to customer of what our sustainability looks like in the U.S. poultry and egg industry. So for an example, one of those metrics might look like would be energy use. So even every producer is monitoring their energy use, and they receive, whether it's an electric bill, diesel bill, natural gas bill. And so they have a baseline that they can then put into the system. They'll know where they stand and what they are measuring. When we generate all of our data and we have our final reports that we will release once we have the tool launched, that producer will then be able to benchmark where they are amongst other producers and the industry itself. Then they can set targets for themselves and others to continually improve in that space and know that they are doing their part to provide a sustainable future for the poultry and egg industry.
And I'm sure looking down the road, we hope to continue these trends. And what efforts do you see? Is there anything you'd like to spend on? And one quick question too, Ernie, the digesters to create energy. I didn't know if you've seen much of that in industry. We had some people testing a few of those in our part of the world, but to maintain these family farms, the poultry operations actually are the cash flow. They're the things that allow the farmers to keep maintaining family farms and stay in business. So I'm just curious, what efforts do you think we need to expand on going forward in the near future?
I think the efforts that we need to expand on in the future for the family farmers, for the poultry producers, is to make accessibility to USDA funds and resources programs that are out there. I think those are the opportunities for those family producers and those family farms that they need the access to, and the technology and the funds to be able to access those technologies that you referenced earlier.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Meyer. I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll yield back.
Right. Thank you, the gentleman from Alabama. And we always appreciate when you add time to the committee's portfolio. That is good. The next gentleman is another friend, Sanford Bishop from Georgia's 2nd Congressional District. And for the witnesses testifying here, we all have very valuable members of this subcommittee that play different roles in the House of Representatives. But my friend Representative Bishop has got the distinction of being one of the cardinals. And so he chairs the subcommittee on House Appropriations that handles the agricultural budget for the USDA. So he becomes very valuable. He is one of the important members that not only focuses on the policy issues in the House Ag Committee, but on the budgetal issues on the House Appropriations Committee that handles the subcommittee for the USDA's budget. So he's a key person that we should all be talking to. Representative Bishop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank you for this hearing today. The witnesses are extraordinary and they've been very enlightening. I've got 2 questions, and the first one I'd like to direct to Ms. Burrows. When I think of sustainability in the livestock sector, I think about Will Harris of White Oak Pastures in my district down in Georgia. He's been recognized throughout the state of Georgia and the nation and even globally for his impeccable stewardship. And he often says that sustainability isn't enough. Agriculture has to be regenerative. And Ms. Burrows, you characterize your family's farming practices as regenerative. Can you tell us how that translates to various practices and systems that are deployed on your farm? You know, White Oak Pastures is located in Bluffton, Georgia, a very small community. It's the largest private employer in Clay County. It has 113 people, and the county itself has only about 2,800 people. But Will Harris employs 185 people, and he writes $100,000 in paychecks every Friday. So as an advocate of regenerative agriculture, what are some of the economic benefits that you've received from adopting the climate smart management practices? And my second question is for the panel at large, and basically it addresses scalable solutions. The potential benefits of community scale meat processing are very broad. And these types of operations have a smaller environmental footprint. They're more flexible and they're able to respond to changing conditions and keep money in the local agricultural community. Tell us how Congress can ensure that investments in local and regional meat processing infrastructure support the expansion of small community scale processes that will support environmentally and socially responsible practices.
Thank you. I so appreciate you mentioning Will. He is a friend of ours, and we spoke together at Berkeley several years ago. We also shared the Leopold Award winning for our family in 2020. So he is an outstanding person that is leading our industry in grazing and viability. All I can say is that when our whole food system and the way we produce food is a broken system, in my opinion. And I believe that regenerative practices are not only the key to our survival as a planet and all the people on it with health, but it's also the way to keep farmers and ranchers on their land so they are providing the food that we need for this planet and protecting our environment. I'm just going to jump over to meat processing because that is the #1 necessity that we need to have local regional processing plants for beef, poultry, or whatever other meats that we need. We have very few that are USDA inspected. plants that we can use or take our animals to. So I will let others answer as well, but thank you for bringing up the regenerative practices. I listed them on my written testimony, and I try to expand on why regenerative is so important. But all life starts in the soil, and all health starts in the soil. And when we are using regenerative practices, we're not only creating the best nutrient-dense food in either crops or animals, but we're also doing the best we can for storing carbon, protecting our environment.
Thank you. Thank you. The scalable solutions is important to me because I'd like to know what we can do to help encourage the local and the regional processing infrastructure,
That's
which
outstanding.
will be economically beneficial. So quickly, for the 40 seconds that are left, if anybody else could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Representative, I'd be happy to address your question about meat processing. We have definitely a need in the cattle industry to increase packing capacity. So very excited about all of the smaller and mid-sized processing facilities that are coming online. We are concerned that they will be sustainable, that we'll have them in the future, that we'll be able to keep them in business. I would say that I would echo what Rosie said. With the lack of inspection, not having USDA inspected facilities really limits how we're able to sell our beef, especially across state lines.
Thank you. That means we need to strengthen the inspection regime. Thank you very much. I think my time has expired, Mr. Chairman, but thank you for the hearing and thank you to all of the witnesses. You've been incredible.
Well, I know the chairman of the subcommittee on appropriations that might be able to help us with dealing with getting more inspectors. So that's something we ought to work on. And anytime you want to talk about enthusiasm on soils, talk to Rosie. Our next member is the gentleman from Kansas, Congressional District 1, Representative Tracy Mann. And then that will be followed by Representative Shelley Pingree from Maine. And unless the chair sees any other members of the subcommittee returning, and members of those witnesses who have been so patient and so good today. The reason you see members come and go is because we have overlapping other committees that we are dealing with. So it's not because they're lacking of attention for your comments or your testimony, but we're multitasking here. So oftentimes members are coming in and going back to other committees as well. So you understand how we try to make this system as efficient as we possibly can. Representative Mann from Kansas, you're on.
Great. Chairman Costas, thanks for recognizing me. Thanks for the time, and thank you for having this hearing and all the panelists and the testimony you submitted, everything. Really, really appreciate it. Also, thank you to Ranking Member Johnson. I agreed with the comments he made during his question period and appreciated the back and forth and the conversation he had with you, Ms. Stackhouse-Lawson. I represent the First District of Kansas. We call it the Big First. It's the largest beef producing district in the country by dollar amount, have a lot of feed yards, packing plants, cow-calf operations. I grew up on a preconditioning feed yard, which is what our family has always done. So I just a handful of questions. First for you, Ms. Brackett, I agree with you in your testimony and the USDA research that you cited explaining that cattle are not truly significant contributors to long-term global warming, that cattle producers actually help reduce other sorts of emissions through various practices. But the story that we often hear in the media paints quite the opposite image. In your opinion, where is the disconnect and how do we change the public discourse? How do we kind of reshape the public's image of production agriculture and these issues?
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate that question. I think this disconnect has happened slowly over several years as people have left rural areas and moved to more urban and suburban areas. There's a loss of historical knowledge about what goes on in farms and ranches and really truly how cattle are actually raised. So that leaves consumers in this country not having a strong foundation when they may hear misperceptions in the news. We're letting other people drive our narrative in this arena. So, and in regards to solving this problem, considering the society that we're in and the distrust that we seem to be facing, I think the solution lies with having credible third parties talking about what the cattle industry does and what our sustainability story really is. I see those third party experts, if you will. They could be chefs, well-known chefs. They could be respected journalists, scientists, but we need other people out there talking about what we're doing. And to back that up a little farther, the science. I can't underscore enough the importance of congressional support for more scientific research in the sustainability arena, that then those third-party folks could hopefully go out and share with the consumers in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Anyone else want to add to that? How do we reshape the image of production agriculture around these issues?
Thank you. This is Rosie.
Yeah, Rosie.
Kim, that is so right on. We need to educate, we need to tell our story, and we need the research that documents all the benefits of how animal grazing is helping save our planet. And I would say, I'd go so far as to say is, without regenerative ag practices and animal grazing, you can look to no future. Because if you look at some of the research and science that people are talking about, we need to take action, and agriculture is the answer to the problem.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think agriculture is the answer. And in my view, the bad news is the distance from farm to fork's never been wider. The good news is with this device, I can communicate to the entire world in a millisecond, right? So how do we do a better job of telling the story in a positive light? And I agree I appreciate the thought about needing the science and the third-party validators to cite the science. One last question. I know I only have a minute, and that'd be for you, Mr. Meyer. You mentioned that the most successful sustainable tools are created by those implementing them and impacted by them. I couldn't agree more. Can you have any examples of your experience with successful industry-led initiatives, and why do you think they were successful?
So at the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Poultry and Eggs, we've just completed our building of the framework, and that was completed this past December. And so we're in the process of building an online tool for all of our members to be able to use and input that data. Once we do that, we'll be able to baseline our sustainability across the U.S. poultry and egg sectors. So we base it on 3 pillars: poultry, planet, and people. Trying to be holistic and encompassing all aspects, every node of the supply chain. In that, there's over 100 metrics that we have listed there. And we've also built our framework in such a way that it allows even those who are just beginning the sustainability journey to be able to use this tool in a manner that will help them be better in the sustainability in the future, right? So a small producer may not have a lot of resources to put against sustainability initiatives, or even know how to tackle starting that process. We built our tool, or building our tool, in a manner that will allow them to ramp into the sustainability journey. And we've also built it in a way that large organizations like McDonald's can, with some resources to put against sustainability, can also use this tool and have their data incorporated in that. So we have an end-to-end view of the sustainability view for the U.S. poultry and egg industries.
Great. Thank you. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the time.
We thank the gentleman, and we thank Mr. Meyer for your points well taken. I believe the staff has indicated to me that the last member, but certainly very patient and well-spoken, is my friend, the representative from Maine, who's been waiting with a great deal of patience for her a lot of time, Representative Pingree, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And it's to the time I've been able to listen, it's been very beneficial. Thank you for holding this hearing, and to all of the witnesses. Thank you for your patience with all of our questions and really your great testimony. I'm particularly excited that two of our practicing farmers are females. So great to have both of you on the panel as well. Let's see, I've got so many things to ask, but I'll try to be quick here. One, I won't go into it, but both of the farmers have mentioned, or two of the farmers have mentioned slaughterhouse capacity, and that's an issue I've been very involved in for a long time. So we're hoping to move that forward, and particularly some of the extra funding we've had to deal with supply chain issues. So we know how important that is. And Ms. Burrows, I'm going to just start with you. Thank you for all of your thoughts today. I had the chance to hear you speak just a little bit on the Real Organic Symposium last Sunday, and really appreciate your talking about the challenges that organic dairy farmers are having with not being paid really the cost of the production that they're dealing with today. And for us in New England, as my colleague from Connecticut mentioned, with the loss of the Horizon contracts, we're in a crisis state right now. So we really feel for the challenges that you're dealing with. And as to the origin of livestock and the other rules, we really, it's shameful how long it has taken to get these done. They are at OMB now, so we have our fingers crossed that we will finally be able to deliver that to farmers. But I want to talk to you about one particular thing you mentioned in your testimony. You obviously have been doing amazing things on your farm. You've got a lot of data, and I understand you do a lot to mentor other farmers who are interested in adopting these practices. And that's so critically important. So many farmers that we meet say, I want to do more, but I need to talk directly to a farmer about how they're going on doing that. So I'm interested in how we do more to provide technical assistance to get that knowledge in the hands of farmers, particularly things like management intensive grazing. So as we're looking forward to the Farm Bill, do you have some recommendations to us about how we could scale up our efforts and what you think is most beneficial?
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing for our industry, and we so very much need your support. I think that the best way that we could get help is for more funding, again, for outreach, education, and research. Farmer to farmer is the best way to educate and have people be open to changing what they're doing and have this paradigm shift of working towards regenerative practices. I want to share one quick story, and that is that in our research study that we were conducting here at our farm over the last 3 years with the Diocese Foundation, we compared regenerative practices with conventional practices. And when we gathered the data after the first year, one of our conventional farmers kind of stood up and got really angry and said, these numbers must be wrong. It's impossible that these regenerative farms cannot spray any pesticide on the almonds and yet have the same yield and volume and pest damage. And after a year of working with the program, the second year, he's converted one of his farms to regenerative practices. And today, now, all of his farms are going regenerative. So it's about farmer to farmer education, but we need the support of research like at Chico State University or the Diocese Society, so that these numbers can show about how we can be a sponge and hold water in our systems and use less water. They're talking about California of a 20% reduction of water use. And we are going to so desperately need these regenerative practices to keep the farmers viable. And
thank you. I got to stop you there because you're wonderful and I could use up all my time, but I want to just very quickly turn to Mr. Medeiros. Thank you so much for your presentation today. A 1,600 cow dairy is sort of unthinkable in the state of Maine, but we know California is a different place. And you talked a little bit about digesters. And I know that California has an alternative manure management program to financially incentivize manure management. I'm trying to work with Mr. Costa's office. I know it's something he's interested in because, being from California, has so much experience there. But I'm just interested. I've included some of the things in the California model in a bill I'm working on, and I just want to know, how do you see the practices working out? Are there things that Congress can learn from what's going on in California that also could be part of the Farm Bill? And you'll have to be quick, but maybe we'll get extra 10 seconds for you.
Okay, real quick. So we have the digester program and the AMP program, which is the alternative manure. I'm sorry.
No, I said the chairman, because of my friend, the member who asked the question, and because the witness being from my area will have the time needed to answer the question properly.
There you go. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, anyway, the two different programs, right? And as I spoke earlier, digesters is not going to fit every program. So the alternative manure management program brings a great alternative to being able to handle methane and how we handle manure. And through research and through funding through that program, and actually in California, it's been oversubscribed, and there's so many producers that want to get involved in the alternative manure management practice. So we're hoping to see more funding coming in that direction. And when we talk about alternative, it ranges from manure separation to drip irrigation using manure water. I mean, we've got research done on farms out here on how we were able to utilize filtration systems and moving manure water to crops, utilizing those nutrients when the plant needs it the most, and lowering our emissions. Just simply how we handle manure on the farm, application processes through the manure management program. So there's so many avenues that we've done out here in California, and I'm sure you know that California has led the way when it comes to environmental issues. I mean, we've got the most aggressive program out here. We're about ready to reach our targets, by reducing methane by 40%. And it was all these programs, not one by itself can do it. And I want Congress to really understand that we talked earlier about consolidation and in the industry. The last thing we want to do is speed up consolidation through mandates, right? And the more incentives we have on a volunteer basis for producers is so valuable to our industry and the viability of our industry. So we need to remember that, and how we keep pushing these programs forward and trying to achieve the goals that we need to achieve. How we fund these programs, because the last thing we want to do is accelerate consolidation because of these programs.
Well, thank you for that. We're definitely going to want to look more to the California experience. So we're anxious to hear more about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the extra time. And I just want to say to Mr. Medeiros, I've raised Jersey cows in my life, and it's rare to hear a Holstein farmer extolling their virtues. So that made my day.
Representative Pengree, I will provide you the information to contact Mr. Medeiros, and you can continue that conversation offline. So we're prepared to wrap up the subcommittee hearing at this time with the close by our ranking member and myself. But let me first take the privilege of the chair to give a shameless promo for the 55th annual World Expo Ag Show held in Tulare, California next week for 3 days. Opening ceremonies will provide the challenges that we face in American agriculture, in which we have participants from all over the world that come and participate. Sessions on dairy, water, government regulations will be held. There are also cooking demonstrations. It's an incredible show that has over 100,000 people that participate in 3 days. So for those of you who haven't been to the World Ag Expo, I put it on your list if you're interested in innovative agricultural technologies and the challenges we face today. With that said, a person who's always very innovative and using the best technological opportunities to his advantage is my good friend, Representative Dusty Johnson, for his closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and for our friendship. I won't take long. I just want to note that so many members of this subcommittee, have talked to the panelists about how good they were today. And listen, it's absolutely true. That is not typical. I could listen. I suspect we all could listen to you guys go on a lot longer. So thank you for your knowledge, your expertise, and your forward-looking love of agriculture. This is a great day. And too many out there want to cast aspersions at American ag producers. They want to tell them to do less. The message we have heard today, loud and clear from both sides of the aisle, is that if we care about sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, we need the innovation and leadership of the American ag producers more now than ever. And so I'm looking forward to what tomorrow brings, because if it's anything like yesterday, it's going to be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Yep.
Am I muted, or can you hear me? Okay, I'm good now. Let me begin again. Thanks again, Representative Dusty Johnson, ranking member of this committee, for your closing comments and always for your participation. For members and for those witnesses who have testified today, I concur with everyone's, I think, reflection that this was a very good subcommittee hearing, one that we can build on as this subcommittee continues to do its work this year on a host of important issues affecting livestock and foreign agriculture. As we help set the table for next year's reauthorization of the Farm Bill. I think it's important, as I listened to the testimony, the questions today, a few things stood out to me. Currently, it's difficult to measure actions that are leading to substantive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's important. And I think it's critical that we come up with more measurable ways to assess progress on the farm, because I think we are making progress. I think this means that we've got to emphasize more on research and what works, and most importantly, as importantly, what doesn't work. When we make sure that the research and cutting edge practices are available to ranchers, dairy farmers, and farmers and ranchers, I think clearly understand, they certainly do in California, the effects of climate change. We see it, we've seen it in my own generation, just different from how things were today than when my father was farming. And so we need to reinforce how important it is, because agricultural leaders throughout the country are taking a lead, I think, in reducing emissions of all kinds. That story is not well told, but we need to do a better job of it, as was mentioned here in the testimony. Finally, I think we need to ensure that our producers are not punished for adapting. I mean, change is constant, and farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women who are successful, especially generational, are those that are best understanding of the changes and are best at adapting change. Those who don't understand that are the ones so often who are unable to stay in business. So it's unreasonable to ask producers to make changes that are financially untenable. We've got to understand that the economics have to work. We must look forward to market-based solutions and find creative ways to incentivize sustainable practices. All the witnesses here today talked about sustainable practices and how they've tried to make them economically viable, and some practices that were not economically viable. So I look forward to continuing the conversation with all who have been involved today, with our farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women, the fellow members of Congress who've been very attentive today. My colleagues really want to work together. As I said, this committee is one of the most bipartisan committees traditionally and today that we have in Congress, and we needed to have more of this, frankly, in my view. the divisions aren't good and they're not helpful toward reaching solutions, common solutions that I think are in the best interest of our country. So for my fellow members of the subcommittee and for the administration, we can work together to deal with the challenges to combat climate change, and we will do so. So I look forward to that continuing effort. Let me close by saying, as chairman, under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplement written responses from the witnesses. So therefore, the witnesses, if you have additional information that you want to provide the subcommittee, you have 10 days to provide that. And members will have 10 days to provide any additional information that they would like to submit for testimony or additional questions they might like to ask the witnesses. So with that said, the subcommittee today is adjourned. Thank you very much.